Good morning. It's Ann Stauffer, and we have completed the book of Genesis. Quite exciting. And last week we looked at Joseph making himself known to his brothers. After Joseph did that, he encouraged the brothers to go and find their father Jacob back in Canaan, and Pharaoh sent his carts to accompany him. Jacob couldn't believe it for a while that he would be reunited with his son and the great success that Joseph had achieved in Egypt. But the carts and the gifts from Pharaoh convinced him. So he made the journey and actually was able to live in that land for 17 years before his death. Now we skip over 400 years or so have passed, and we find ourselves at the beginning of the book of Exodus. And actually, our passage is chapter 2 of Exodus, the first 10 verses. And our story this morning is the birth of Moses. So we are indeed about to embark upon the story of what has been deemed the greatest hero of the Bible, Moses. And if you all would like to take a minute and download the scripture itself from YouTube page and also the helpful questions that accompany, you may want to take a moment to do so at this point. As I said, 400 years have passed. Many kings have come and gone. The 12 tribes of Israel that were named after Joseph's sons have had many generations to follow and have occupied Egypt. But things have changed in Egypt. Once the celebrated Israelites or Hebrew people have made a name for themselves, and they have kind of experienced a fall from grace into slavery. The Egyptians who were responsible for the pyramids and things that we know today were incredible engineers, and they were about the building process. Always temples and monuments were in the minds of the pharaohs, and they set about putting the Hebrews to work. But the Pharaoh had one big fear, and that would be that if they were to be infiltrated or go to war against another country, could they really count on these people, these Hebrews, these Israelites, to be their ally? What if these people revolted against them and sided with another country? So he came up with a plan that he thought might work, and it would be this. What if they did away with all of the males born to the Hebrew race and only the girls were spared? That would mean that the strong young males would not be any threat to them whatsoever. So he began to tell the midwives that were responsible for helping the Hebrew women to give birth that they should actually kill the male offspring during birth, not allow them to survive. The midwives didn't think much about this, so they began to tell the government, to tell the pharaohs, oh, we didn't get there in time for the birth. We just couldn't do that. So the Hebrew males kept multiplying at the same rate, and nothing much was done about that. Now arrives the time of Moses. Let me share with you the scripture. The birth of Moses, Exodus 2. Now a man of the house of Levi, now we'll recall, Levi was one of the sons of Jacob. So here we have all these generations later. A man of the house of Levi married a Levite woman, and she became pregnant and gave birth to a son. When she saw he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months. But when she could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket for him and coated it with tar and pitch. And then she placed the child in it and put it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile. His sister, her name was Miriam, stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. Then Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile to bathe, and her attendants were walking along the river bank. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her slave girl to get it. She opened it and saw the baby. He was crying, and she felt sorry for him. Well, this is one of the Hebrew babies, she said. And then his sister, little Miriam, waiting among the reeds for just the right moment, can't you picture it? She asked Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go and get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you? Yes, go, she answered. And the girl went and got the baby's own mother. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, Take this baby and nurse him for me, and I will pay you." So the woman took the baby and nursed him, and when the child grew older, she took him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses, which meant I drew him out of the water. So here's the series of miracles, not only as Moses spared, but his own mother receives him back to her breast, spends this precious nursing time, becomes paid for it. Pharaoh's daughter adopts him back into her own house, and he is raised among the royal courts, the finest of education, learns to read and write. Amazing, isn't it? God's plan for the leader of his people. And we'll be following this in weeks to come. You'll want to also look at the questions that we have each week, looking into the scriptures and then your own story to apply this to your own life. I'd like to, at this point in our recording, to go into our God Felt reading, the meditation portion based on God Calling by A.J. Russell. Our reading being entitled The Risen Life. Arise and shine, for thy light is come, and the glory of the Lord is risen upon thee. Isaiah 61. The call comes this day for all who love me, to arise from earth bands, from sin, from sloth and depression, distrust, fear, all that hinders your risen life. To arise to beauty, to holiness, to joy, to peace, to work inspired by love and joy, and to arise from death to life. Remember that death was the last enemy that I destroyed, and so with death was my victory complete. You have nothing then to fear. Sin too is conquered and forgiven as you live and move and work with me. All that depresses you, all that you fear, are powerless to harm you. They are but phantoms. The real forces I conquered in the wilderness, in the Garden of Gethsemane, on the cross, and in the tomb. Let nothing hinder your risen life. Risen with Christ, said my servant Paul. Seek to know more and more of that risen life, and that is the life of conquest. Of that risen life was it truly said, I live, yet not I, but Christ liveth within me. Fear and despair and tears come as you stand by the empty tomb. They have taken away my Lord, and I know not where they have laid him. Arise from your fears and go out into the sunlight to meet me, your risen Lord. Amen. Our God Shift question for this week, as we look at the great plan and providence of God, as he literally had planned for Moses to be lifted up out of that basket, out of that river. As we look at so often how we would rather hide in the shadows of our depression, of our distrust, how might we shift from that position to one of confidence and trust that God indeed has an assignment for us from our birth? How might we shift from a place of fear and distrust to one of hope, realistic hope, and arise? I'll be with you next week. Until then, God bless.